The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the weathered depot, and Hannah Brennan pressed her gloved hand against the window, peering through the dust at what would be her new home, her stomach tight with dread as she searched the sparse crowd for the stern face of the rancher who had advertised for a wife through the matrimonial agency. Julian, California, looked exactly as harsh as she had imagined during the long journey from Boston. The August sun beat down mercilessly on the dirt streets, and the buildings seemed to crouch low against the earth, as if trying to escape the heat. It was 1878, and Hannah had left behind everything familiar, trading the crowded streets and proper society of Massachusetts for this dusty frontier town in San Diego County. All because her options had run out after her father's death left her penniless and alone. She smoothed down her dark blue traveling dress, now covered in a fine layer of dust despite her best efforts, and tried to steady her breathing. The advertisement had been simple and direct. Rancher seeking wife, it had read, must be of good character and willing to work. Franklin Hayes. That was all she knew of the man who would become her husband, and the agency had assured her that he was respectable, though they had warned her that frontier life was not for the faint of heart. The driver opened the door, and the heat hit her like a physical force. Hannah gathered her small carpetbag, the only luggage she owned, and stepped down onto the wooden platform. A group of men stood nearby, their faces weathered and hard, eyes assessing her with open curiosity. She lifted her chin, refusing to show the fear that churned in her stomach. "Mrs. Brennan." A voice, surprisingly gentle, came from her left. Hannah turned and found herself looking up at a tall man with kind brown eyes beneath the brim of a worn cowboy hat. He was perhaps 26 or 27, only a few years older than her own 22 years, with sun-darkened skin and strong features that might have been stern if not for the warmth in his expression. He held his hat in his hands now, his dark hair slightly flattened from where it had rested, and he was watching her with what looked like concern rather than the cold assessment she had expected. "Yes, I am Hannah Brennan," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mr. Hayes." "Franklin Hayes, yes, madam. I hope your journey was not too difficult." He spoke softly, as though afraid of startling her, and reached for her bag. "Please, let me take that for you." She hesitated, then released the carpetbag into his care. His hands were work-roughened, she noticed, but his touch was careful. "The journey was long, Mr. Hayes, but I am here now." "I have a wagon just over here," he said, gesturing toward a sturdy-looking wagon hitched to 2 horses. "The ranch is about an hour's ride from town. I thought we might stop at the hotel restaurant first if you are hungry. Or if you would prefer to go straight to the ranch, I understand. I imagine you must be tired." Hannah blinked, surprised by the offer. She had expected to be hurried along, treated as just another piece of cargo. "That is very considerate. I confess I am quite hungry." A smile touched his lips, transforming his face completely. "Then we will eat first. No sense starting off on an empty stomach." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Hannah took it. They walked across the dusty street toward a building with a faded sign that read Julian Hotel. The touch of his arm beneath her hand was solid and steady, and she found herself stealing glances at his profile as they walked. Inside the restaurant, Franklin pulled out a chair for her at a table near the window, then settled himself across from her. A woman with graying hair approached with a smile. "Franklin Hayes, as I live and breathe. And who is this lovely lady, Mrs. Morrison?" "This is Miss Hannah Brennan from Boston. She has just arrived today." "Hannah, Mrs. Morrison runs the best kitchen in Julian." "Soon to be Mrs. Hayes, I hear," Mrs. Morrison said with a warm smile. "Welcome to Julian, dear. You must be exhausted from your travels. I will bring you both something hearty." When they were alone, Hannah folded her hands on the table and looked directly at Franklin. "Mr. Hayes, I feel I should be honest with you. I am not accustomed to frontier life. I have lived all my life in the city. But I am a hard worker and I am willing to learn whatever is necessary." Franklin leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "Miss Brennan, I appreciate your honesty, and I should be honest with you as well. I know this arrangement is not what either of us might have chosen under different circumstances, but I want you to know that I will do everything in my power to make sure you are comfortable and safe. I am not looking for a servant. I am hoping for a partner, someone to share the work and the life I am building here." "You are very kind," Hannah said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "I expected something quite different." "What did you expect?" he asked gently. Hannah considered her words carefully. "I expected harshness, I suppose. Demands without consideration. A business arrangement without kindness." Franklin was quiet for a moment, then said, "My mother raised me to believe that kindness costs nothing but is worth everything. She passed 5 years ago, but I try to live by what she taught me. This ranch, it was hers before it was mine. She built it up from nothing after my father died when I was just a boy. She would want me to treat you with respect and care." The sincerity in his voice touched something in Hannah's chest. "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was," Franklin agreed. "You remind me of her a little. She came out here from Pennsylvania, left everything she knew to start over. It takes courage to do what you have done, Miss Brennan." Mrs. Morrison returned with plates of roasted chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread, along with cold water that tasted like the best thing Hannah had ever drunk. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Hannah found herself relaxing slightly. The food was indeed excellent, and Franklin ate with the steady efficiency of a working man, but he was not uncouth. His manners were simple but respectful. "Tell me about the ranch," Hannah said between bites. "What should I expect?" Franklin set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. "It is not large, but it is good land. I run about 200 head of cattle, and I have a small horse operation as well. The house is modest, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting room. I have been managing on my own for the past year, so I will admit it is not as tidy as it might be. I have a hired hand, Miguel, who helps with the cattle. Good man, been with me for 3 years. His wife Rosa sometimes comes up to help with washing and mending. They have a small cabin on the far edge of the property." "It sounds lovely," Hannah said, and realized she meant it. The picture he painted was simple but honest. "I hope you will think so," Franklin said. "I know it is not what you left behind in Boston." "What I left behind in Boston was nothing," Hannah said, more sharply than she intended. Then, softer, "I am sorry. I do not mean to sound bitter. My father was a clerk, and when he died suddenly last year, I discovered he had debts I knew nothing about. Everything we owned was sold to pay them. I had no family, no prospects. The matrimonial agency seemed like my only option." Franklin reached across the table and, after a moment's hesitation, gently covered her hand with his. "I am sorry for your loss, and I am glad you chose to answer my advertisement. I think we might do well together, Miss Brennan, if you are willing to give this a chance." The warmth of his hand over hers sent a flutter through Hannah's stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. She looked into his brown eyes and saw nothing but honest kindness there. "I am willing, Mr. Hayes. Then perhaps when you are ready you might call me Franklin. And I would like to call you Hannah, if you do not mind." "I do not mind at all, Franklin." They finished their meal and Franklin paid Mrs. Morrison, who pressed a small cloth-wrapped package into Hannah's hands. "Some cookies for the road, dear, and you come back and visit me soon. I want to hear how you are settling in." Outside, Franklin helped Hannah up onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her. The horses started off at an easy pace, and Julian fell away behind them. The landscape was beautiful in a stark way, all golden hills dotted with oak trees and rocks, the sky impossibly blue overhead. The heat was intense, but a faint breeze made it bearable. "It is so different from home," Hannah said, looking around with wide eyes. "Do you miss it?" Franklin asked. Hannah considered the question honestly. "I miss the familiarity of it, but I do not miss the life I had there, if that makes sense. I felt trapped in Boston, even before my father died. There was no future for me there, not really. A woman alone has very few options." "You have options here," Franklin said. "Maybe not the same ones you would have had in the city, but I promise you, Hannah, you will never be trapped with me. If you find that this life truly does not suit you, I will not hold you against your will." Hannah turned to look at him, startled. "You would let me leave?" "I would not want you to be unhappy," Franklin said simply. "But I hope it will not come to that. I hope you will find something here worth staying for." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the wagon creaking rhythmically beneath them. Hannah studied Franklin from the corner of her eye, noting the way he handled the reins with easy confidence, the way he pointed out landmarks along the road, his voice gentle and informative. He showed her where the creek ran, explained that the oak trees provided good shade for the cattle in summer, pointed out a hawk circling high overhead. "You get lonely out here?" Hannah asked. Franklin was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "It is part of why I decided to advertise for a wife. The work is constant and that helps, but evenings can be long. I find myself talking to the horses more than I probably should." Hannah laughed, surprising herself. "I used to talk to my cat in Boston." He was not much of a conversationalist, but he was a good listener. "What happened to him?" Franklin asked. "I had to leave him with a neighbor when I came west. She promised to take good care of him." Hannah felt a pang of sadness at the memory of saying goodbye to Dickens, her orange tabby who had been her constant companion. "Maybe we can get you another cat," Franklin said. "The barn could use a good mouser." The kindness of the offer made Hannah's throat tight. "That would be nice." "Thank you." The ranch came into view as they crested a hill, and Hannah caught her breath. It was nestled in a small valley with the house sitting on a slight rise. The house itself was simple, built of wood that had weathered to a silvery gray with a wide porch across the front. Behind it were a barn and several other outbuildings. Fences marked off paddocks and pastures, and she could see cattle dotting the hills in the distance. "It is beautiful," Hannah said softly. Franklin looked pleased. "I am glad you think so. I know it is not grand, but it is home." As they drew closer, a man emerged from the barn, waving. He was shorter than Franklin, with dark hair and a ready smile. Franklin pulled the wagon to a stop near the house and jumped down, then came around to help Hannah descend. "Miguel, this is Hannah Brennan, my intended bride." "Hannah, this is Miguel Ruiz, the finest horseman in San Diego County." Miguel swept off his hat and bowed slightly. "Welcome, Miss Brennan. It is a pleasure to meet you. Franklin has been like a nervous cat all week waiting for your arrival." "I have not," Franklin protested, but Hannah noticed the color rising in his cheeks. "He cleaned the house 3 times, Miguel continued, his eyes twinkling. "And he made me help him build new shelves in the kitchen. He wanted everything to be perfect." Hannah felt warmth spread through her chest at this information. That was very thoughtful. Franklin shot Miguel a look that promised retribution later, then turned to Hannah. "Let me show you the house. Miguel, can you see to the horses?" "Of course," Miguel said, still grinning. "Welcome home, Miss Brennan." Franklin carried Hannah's carpetbag and led her up the steps to the porch. The door was not locked, and he pushed it open, then stepped aside to let her enter first. The interior was dim after the bright sunshine, and it took Hannah's eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, she found herself in a simple but clean sitting room. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and sturdy furniture was arranged around it. Everything was indeed very clean, and she could see the new shelves Miguel had mentioned in the kitchen area that opened off the sitting room. "The bedrooms are through here," Franklin said, leading her down a short hallway. He opened the first door. "This is the main bedroom. I thought you should have it. I will take the smaller room." Hannah stepped into the room and found it surprisingly pleasant. A large bed with a simple quilt stood against one wall, and a dresser and washstand occupied another. The window looked out over the valley, and white curtains, clearly new, hung at the sides. "You bought new curtains," she said. "I wanted you to feel welcome," Franklin said quietly from the doorway. "If there is anything you need, anything at all, you just have to tell me." Hannah set her bag down on the bed and turned to face him. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me. I could be terrible." Franklin smiled. "You could be, but I do not think you are, and as for why, well, I figure we are both taking a chance on each other. The least I can do is make that chance as pleasant as possible. Besides, my mother always said you catch more flies with honey than vinegar." "Your mother was a wise woman," Hannah said. "That she was." Franklin moved to the window. "There is a pump in the kitchen for water, and we have an outhouse behind the barn. Not as fancy as city plumbing, I imagine, but it serves. Rosa usually comes on Mondays to help with washing. I told her about you, and she is looking forward to meeting you. She said to tell you that she will be happy to show you anything you need to know about managing the house and ranch." "Everyone here seems very welcoming," Hannah said. "Julian is a good town, and we try to look out for each other," Franklin said. "It can be harsh out here, so we have to be kind to each other to balance it out." There was a wisdom in that simple philosophy that Hannah appreciated. She looked around the room again, taking in the care that had gone into preparing it for her. "When is the wedding to take place?" "I thought we might wait a week or two," Franklin said. "Give you time to settle in and make sure this is what you want. The circuit judge comes through once a month, and he will be back in 10 days. If you are ready by then, we can marry. If you need more time, we can wait until his next visit." Hannah was surprised again by his consideration. "You are giving me a choice." "Of course," Franklin said, looking confused. "This is as much your decision as mine. I want you to be certain." "Most men would insist on marrying immediately," Hannah said. "I am not most men," Franklin said simply. "And I meant what I said earlier. I want a partner, not a prisoner." "Take the time you need, Hannah. I will sleep in the other room, and you will have your privacy. Miguel and Rosa can serve as chaperones if you are worried about propriety." Hannah felt something shift in her chest, a wall she had not even realized she had built beginning to crack. "Thank you, Franklin. That means more than you know," he nodded. "I will let you rest and freshen up. I need to check on the cattle with Miguel. We will have supper around 6 if that suits you. Nothing fancy, I am afraid. I am a passable cook, but I will not pretend to be good at it." "I can cook," Hannah offered. "I am actually quite good at it. It would give me something useful to do." Franklin's face brightened. "That would be wonderful. The larder is well stocked. Mrs. Morrison sent me home with provisions just yesterday. Cook whatever you like." After he left, Hannah sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room that would be hers, at least for now. The events of the day swirled in her mind. She had arrived expecting harshness, prepared to endure whatever she must to survive. Instead, she had been greeted with a kindness that seemed to radiate from Franklin Hayes like warmth from a fire. She rose and unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her brush and mirror on the dresser. Then she washed her face and hands in the basin, using the cool water from the pitcher that had been thoughtfully filled and left for her. The kitchen, when she explored it, was better supplied than she had expected. There were flour and cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, eggs in a basket, and even some vegetables in a cool box. She found potatoes and onions and decided on a simple stew for supper. As she worked, she looked out the window at the land stretching away in all directions, at the golden hills and the blue sky, and felt something inside her begin to unfold. She was slicing potatoes when she heard horses approaching and looked up to see Franklin and Miguel riding in from the pasture. They were talking and laughing about something, easy in each other's company. Franklin looked up at the house as if sensing her gaze and raised his hand in greeting. Hannah waved back, feeling suddenly shy. The stew was simmering nicely when Franklin came in through the back door, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg. "Something smells wonderful," he said. "It is just a simple stew," Hannah said, "but it should be ready soon. I am sure it will be delicious." Franklin moved to the pump and washed his hands and face, then dried off with a towel. "How are you settling in?" "Well, I think," Hannah said. "The house is very comfortable. You have done a good job maintaining it." "I try," Franklin said. "Though I will admit, having someone else here to share it with makes it feel more like a home already." They ate at the simple wooden table, and Franklin praised the stew enthusiastically. Hannah found herself watching him, noting the way he ate with appreciation, the way he asked her questions about herself and listened carefully to her answers. She told him about growing up in Boston, about her father's work as a clerk, about the books she loved to read and the music she missed hearing. "I have a fiddle," Franklin said. "I am not very skilled, but I can play a few tunes. Maybe after supper sometime I could play for you." "I would like that," Hannah said. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Franklin showed Hannah around the rest of the property. They walked to the barn where several horses nickered greetings and Franklin introduced her to each one by name. There was a big bay gelding named Scout, a pretty paint mare named Daisy, and several others. "Scout is my primary riding horse," Franklin explained, stroking the gelding's nose. "But Daisy is gentle and steady. I thought she might be good for you to learn on if you would like to learn to ride." "I have never ridden a horse," Hannah admitted, "but I would like to learn." "Then I will teach you," Franklin said. "We can start tomorrow if you are not too tired." They continued the tour and Franklin showed her the chicken coop, the smokehouse, the root cellar. Everything was neat and well maintained, evidence of the care he took with his property. As they walked back toward the house in the gathering twilight, Hannah found herself more relaxed than she had been in months. "The stars will be out soon," Franklin said. "They are something to see out here, away from city lights." "I look forward to seeing them," Hannah said. On the porch, Franklin paused. "Hannah, I want you to know that you are safe here. I will never force you to do anything you do not want to do. Take all the time you need to decide about the wedding, about everything. There is no rush." Hannah looked up at him in the fading light, at his honest face and kind eyes, and felt her heart beat a little faster. "You are not what I expected, Franklin Hayes. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" he asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "It is a very good thing," Hannah said softly. Franklin smiled, and for a moment they just stood there looking at each other. Then he cleared his throat gently. "I should let you rest. It has been a long day for you. If you need anything during the night, anything at all, just call out. I am a light sleeper." "Thank you, Franklin, for everything." Inside, Hannah prepared for bed in her new room, changing into her nightgown and brushing out her hair. Through the window, she could see the stars beginning to appear, more stars than she had ever seen in her life, scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. She thought about Franklin in the next room. about the kindness he had shown her from the moment she arrived, and felt a flutter of hope that perhaps this strange arrangement might work out after all. In the days that followed, Hannah settled into a routine at the ranch. She woke early and prepared breakfast for Franklin and Miguel, finding pleasure in the simple act of cooking for others. Franklin continued to treat her with unfailing kindness and respect, always asking her opinion, always considering her comfort. He taught her to ride on gentle Daisy, walking beside the horse for the first several lessons, his hand ready to steady her if needed. "You are doing wonderfully," he encouraged as she managed to trot in a circle around the corral on the fourth day. "You are a natural." Hannah laughed, breathless and exhilarated. "I feel like I might fall off at any moment." "You will not fall. I will not let you," Franklin said, and the certainty in his voice made Hannah believe him. Rosa arrived on Monday morning as promised, a warm-hearted woman in her 40s with a ready smile and capable hands. She embraced Hannah like an old friend, and immediately began teaching her the rhythms of ranch life, how to manage the washing in the big copper pot, how to tend the vegetable garden, how to preserve food for the winter. "Franklin is a good man," Rosa told Hannah as they worked side by side in the garden. "My Miguel, he has worked for many men, and he says Franklin is the best, fair and honest, and he works as hard as any of his hands. He has been very kind to me," Hannah said, pulling a weed. Rosa gave her a knowing look. "He looks at you like a man in love, you know, even after just a few days." Hannah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "We barely know each other." "Sometimes the heart knows before the head does," Rosa said wisely. "And you look at him the same way when you think no one is watching." Did she? Hannah wondered. It was true that she found herself thinking about Franklin constantly, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle strength in his hands, the sound of his laugh. She looked forward to their meals together, to their evening walks, to the conversations that flowed easily between them. One evening, true to his word, Franklin brought out his fiddle after supper. "Fair warning," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "I really am not very good." But when he began to play, Hannah found the music lovely, simple and heartfelt. He played a few traditional tunes and then a slower melody that made her throat tight with emotion. "That was beautiful," she said when he finished. "What is it called?" "I am not sure it has a name," Franklin said. "My mother used to hum it when I was young. I taught myself to play it by ear." "It is lovely," Hannah said. "Would you play it again?" He did, and this time Hannah closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. When she opened them, she found Franklin watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Hannah," he said softly, setting the fiddle aside, "I need to tell you something." "Yes." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I know we have only known each other for a short time. And I know this arrangement was supposed to be practical, a marriage of convenience. But I find myself feeling things I did not expect to feel." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "You are the kindest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known, and I think I am falling in love with you." Hannah's heart hammered in her chest. "Franklin, I think I am falling in love with you too." The words hung in the air between them, precious and fragile. Then Franklin stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair. "Then marry me, Hannah. Not because of some arrangement made through an agency, but because we choose each other. Marry me because you want to build a life with me." "Yes," Hannah said, tears pricking her eyes. "Yes, I will marry you, Franklin Hayes." He took her hands in his, and the touch sent warmth flooding through her. "The judge will be here in 4 days. Is that enough time?" "It is perfect," Hannah said. Franklin raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, a gesture so tender that Hannah felt her breath catch. "I will do everything in my power to make you happy, Hannah, every single day for the rest of my life." "You already make me happy," she said, "just by being who you are." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Rosa helped Hannah make over her best dress, adding new lace and pressing it carefully. Mrs. Morrison sent word that she would provide a wedding cake, and Miguel's eyes twinkled as he teased Franklin mercilessly about his upcoming nuptials. "You are nervous like a green colt," Miguel observed as he and Franklin mended a fence 2 days before the wedding. "I just want everything to be perfect," Franklin said. "She deserves that." "She already thinks you are perfect," Miguel said. "Anyone can see the way she looks at you." "You are a lucky man, my friend." "I know," Franklin said softly. "I know I am." The night before the wedding, Franklin asked Hannah to walk with him. They strolled away from the house toward a small hill that overlooked the valley. The stars were brilliant overhead, and a sliver of moon hung low on the horizon. "I want to give you something," Franklin said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small wooden box and opened it to reveal a simple gold ring. "It was my mother's wedding ring. I would be honored if you would wear it." Hannah took the box with trembling hands. The ring was beautiful in its simplicity, a plain gold band worn smooth with time. "Franklin, I cannot take your mother's ring. Please," he said. "She would want you to have it." "I know she would have loved you, Hannah. You remind me so much of her with your courage and your kindness." Hannah slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. "I will treasure it always, and I will try to be worthy of it." "You already are," Franklin said. He drew her closer, and Hannah went willingly into his arms. They stood there under the stars, holding each other, and Hannah felt as though she had finally found where she belonged. "I am so glad I came here," she whispered against his chest. "I was so frightened when I arrived. I expected everything to be hard and cold." "And instead," Franklin asked, his voice rumbling in his chest. "Instead I found you," Hannah said. "And you greeted me with kindness that has never faded away, not for a single moment." Franklin pulled back just enough to look down at her face. "It will never fade, darling. That is a promise I make to you. No matter what challenges we face, no matter what hardships come, I will always treat you with kindness and love." "As I will treat you," Hannah promised. Then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Franklin lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, a kiss full of promise and hope, and Hannah felt as though her heart might burst from the joy of it. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Rosa arrived early to help Hannah prepare, fussing over her hair and dress like a mother hen. "You look beautiful," she declared, standing back to admire her handiwork. "Franklin will not be able to speak when he sees you." The ceremony was held in the small church in Julian, with the circuit judge officiating. Mrs. Morrison was there, along with a handful of townspeople who had come to welcome Hannah to the community. Miguel stood up as Franklin's witness, and Rosa served as Hannah's. But Hannah had eyes only for Franklin, who stood at the front of the church in his best suit, looking nervous and hopeful and heartbreakingly handsome. When she walked down the aisle toward him, his face lit up with such joy that Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. "Dearly beloved," the judge began, and Hannah hardly heard the words that followed, too focused on Franklin's hand holding hers, on the warmth in his eyes, on the rightness of this moment. "Do you, Franklin Hayes, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the judge asked. "I do," Franklin said, his voice strong and clear. "With all my heart, I do." "And do you, Hannah Brennan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Hannah said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "Then by the power vested in me by the state of California, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Franklin cupped Hannah's face gently in his hands and kissed her, and the small congregation erupted in cheers and applause. When they broke apart, Both were smiling through tears. Mrs. Morrison hosted a small reception at the hotel, with cake and lemonade and dancing. Franklin proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, spinning Hannah around the floor with easy grace. "Where did you learn to dance?" Hannah asked, laughing and breathless. "My mother taught me," Franklin said. "She said every gentleman should know how to dance." "She taught you well," Hannah said. As the afternoon wore on, they finally said their goodbyes and rode back to the ranch, now truly their home together. Franklin helped Hannah down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, swept her up into his arms. "What are you doing?" she asked, laughing. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," Franklin said. "It is supposed to be good luck." He carried her through the door and into their home, setting her down gently in the sitting room. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, painting everything in golden light. For a moment they just looked at each other, the reality of their new life together settling over them. "I love you, Hannah Hayes," Franklin said softly. "I love you too, Franklin," Hannah replied. That night they lay together as husband and wife, and Franklin was as gentle and considerate as Hannah had known he would be. Afterwards she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you happy?" Franklin asked, his fingers stroking through her hair. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," Hannah said honestly. "When I left Boston, I thought I was going to my doom. I never imagined I would find you." "I feel the same way," Franklin said. "I was so lonely before you came. I did not even realize how lonely until you were here and everything became brighter." As the seasons changed and autumn gave way to winter, Hannah and Franklin settled into married life with ease. They worked together during the day, Hannah managing the house and helping with the smaller ranch tasks, while Franklin and Miguel handled the cattle and horses. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Franklin reading aloud from books Hannah had brought from Boston or playing his fiddle while she worked on her sewing. Rosa became a dear friend, teaching Hannah more about ranch life and regaling her with stories of Julian and its inhabitants. Miguel and his wife often joined Franklin and Hannah for Sunday suppers, the four of them laughing and talking late into the night. Winter brought rain to the California hills, turning them green and lush. Hannah learned to manage the challenges of ranch life during the wet season, to keep the house warm against the chill, to preserve and prepare the food they had stored for the winter months. One February evening, as they lay in bed listening to rain drum on the roof, Hannah turned to Franklin with news that made her both nervous and excited. "Franklin, I have something to tell you." He rolled over to face her, concern flickering across his features. "What is it, darling?" "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Hannah assured him. "Better than fine, actually. I am going to have a baby." Franklin's eyes went wide and then a smile spread across his face that was brighter than the sun. "A baby, truly, truly," Hannah confirmed. "I think it will be sometime in early September." Franklin pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "This is the most wonderful news. I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents." He pulled back suddenly, worry creasing his brow. "Are you scared? Do you need anything?" "Should you be resting more?" Hannah laughed at his concern. "I am a little scared, but mostly I am happy. And Rosa says she will help me, and there is a good doctor in Julian. We will manage just fine." "I am going to take such good care of you," Franklin promised. "Both of you." True to his word, Franklin became even more attentive as Hannah's pregnancy progressed. He insisted she not overwork herself, taking on more of the household tasks and bringing Rosa in more frequently to help. He built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, spending hours sanding and polishing it until it gleamed. Hannah bloomed with the spring, her belly growing round as the hills turned golden again with summer heat. She found she loved being pregnant, loved the feeling of life growing inside her, loved the way Franklin would talk to her belly and rest his hand there to feel the baby kick. "He is going to be strong like his father," Franklin said one evening, his hand spread across Hannah's stomach. "Or she will be strong like her mother," Hannah countered with a smile. "Either way," Franklin said, kissing her gently, "this child is already the luckiest in the world to have you as a mother." In early September, just as Hannah had predicted, she went into labor. Rosa was there, along with Dr. Williams from town, and Franklin paced outside the bedroom like a caged animal, Miguel trying unsuccessfully to calm him. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time," Miguel reminded him. "Hannah is strong. She will be fine." "I know," Franklin said, but he did not stop pacing. The labor was long and difficult, and Franklin could hear Hannah's cries of pain through the door. He wanted nothing more than to burst in and help her somehow, but Rosa had firmly barred him from the room, saying he would only get in the way. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he heard a new sound. The sharp, indignant wail of a newborn baby. Franklin's heart leaped into his throat. A moment later, Rosa opened the door, her face wreathed in smiles. "You have a son, Franklin, a beautiful, healthy baby boy. And Hannah is tired but doing well." Franklin did not wait to hear more. He rushed into the room and found Hannah propped up against the pillows, exhausted and sweaty but smiling, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "Franklin," she said softly, "come meet your son." He approached the bed with reverent steps and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making small snuffling sounds as he rooted against Hannah's chest. "He is perfect," Franklin breathed. "You are amazing, both of you." Hannah shifted the baby so Franklin could hold him, and he took his son with trembling hands, cradling him carefully against his chest. The baby opened his eyes, dark and unfocused, and Franklin felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "What should we name him?" Hannah asked. Franklin thought for a moment, then said, "What about James, after your father?" Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that. Your father helped make you who you are," Franklin said. "I think it would be a fine way to honor him." "James Hayes," Hannah said, testing the name. "I love it." Little James proved to be a good baby, healthy and alert. Hannah took to motherhood with the same determination and grace she brought to everything else, and Franklin marveled daily at the sight of his wife nursing their son or singing him to sleep. The ranch continued to thrive, and Franklin hired another hand to help Miguel now that there was more work to do. Hannah managed the household with James strapped to her back in a carrier Rosa had made, the baby content to be close to his mother while she went about her daily tasks. As James grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch grew too. Franklin expanded the herd and built a new barn. Hannah started a larger garden and learned to can and preserve enough food to see them through the winter and have extra to sell in town. They were building something solid and lasting, a legacy for their son and any other children who might come. When James was 2 years old, Hannah found herself pregnant again. This time, she was less nervous, confident in her body's ability and in Franklin's steadfast support. Their daughter, Mary, was born in the spring of 1882. A tiny bundle with her mother's delicate features and her father's dark eyes. James was initially suspicious of this small intruder who demanded so much of his mother's attention, but Franklin patiently taught him to be gentle, and soon the boy was proudly helping to care for his baby sister. "You are such a good big brother," Hannah told James, watching him carefully stroke Mary's soft hair. "I love her," James declared with the simple certainty of a child. The years flowed by like water, each one bringing new joys and challenges. There were hard times, too. A drought in 1884 forced Franklin to sell off part of the herd. A bad winter in 1886 took a toll on the cattle. Hannah's health was fragile for several months after Mary's birth, and Franklin spent sleepless nights caring for her and the children. But through it all, the kindness that had characterized their relationship from the very beginning never faded. Franklin never took out his frustrations on Hannah, never blamed her or treated her harshly even when times were hard. And Hannah stood beside him as a true partner, working as hard as he did to keep the ranch going, offering encouragement and love when the weight of responsibility threatened to crush him. In 1888, when James was 9 and Mary was 6, Hannah gave birth to twin boys, Robert and William. The house felt suddenly very full and very loud, and Franklin added on 2 more bedrooms to accommodate their growing family. 4 children, Franklin said one night after the twins were finally asleep, collapsing into bed beside Hannah. "When did we get 4 children?" "I believe it happened when you kept looking at me with those warm brown eyes," Hannah teased, snuggling into his side. Franklin laughed and kissed the top of her head. "I cannot help it. You are irresistible. Even with flour in my hair and baby spit up on my dress," Hannah asked. "Especially then," Franklin said. "You are beautiful, Hannah Hayes. More beautiful now than the day I first saw you step off that stage coach." "You are still the kindest man I have ever known," Hannah said. "That has never changed, not once in all these years." "I promised you it never would, darling," Franklin reminded her. "And I intend to keep that promise until my last breath." As the children grew, the ranch became a lively, bustling place. James showed an early aptitude for working with horses, spending hours with his father and Miguel learning to train and care for the animals. Mary inherited her mother's love of books and learning, and Hannah taught her to read and write, using the precious books she had brought from Boston. The twins were wild and adventurous, always getting into mischief, but they were good boys at heart, and Franklin was patient in teaching them right from wrong. Sunday dinners at the Hayes Ranch became a tradition, with Rosa and Miguel and their own children joining the celebration, the table groaning under the weight of food and the house ringing with laughter. In 1892, tragedy struck when Miguel fell from a horse and broke his leg badly. Franklin brought him and Rosa to live in the main house while he healed, and the 2 families grew even closer. When Miguel recovered, he and Franklin became equal partners in the ranch, a partnership that benefited them both. Hannah's hair began to show threads of silver as she entered her 30s, and Franklin's face gained new lines from years of working in the sun. But the love between them only deepened with time. They still took evening walks together when they could, still sat on the porch after the children were in bed, talking about everything and nothing. "You ever regret it?" Franklin asked one evening when they were alone under the stars. "Leaving Boston, coming out here to marry a stranger?" Hannah thought about the question seriously, as she always did when Franklin asked her something. "Not for a single moment," she said finally. "My life in Boston was small and narrow. Here with you it is full and rich. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted, Franklin. A home, a family, love that has never faltered." "You gave me the same," Franklin said, pulling her close. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions. You brought light and life to this place, to me. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Hannah kissed him, deep and sweet, and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance, witnesses to a love that had started with a simple act of kindness and had grown into something unshakable. When James turned 18 in 1897, he announced his intention to marry Sarah Mitchell, a sweet girl from Julian whose father owned the general store. Franklin and Hannah gave their blessing, and the wedding was a grand affair, the whole town turning out to celebrate. "I want what you and Father have," James told Hannah the night before his wedding. "The way you look at each other, the way you support each other through everything, that is what I want with Sarah. Then treat her with kindness and respect every single day," Hannah advised. "That is the secret, really. Your father has never once spoken a harsh word to me, never treated me as less than his equal. Love is not just a feeling, James. It is a choice you make every day." "I will remember that," James promised. Mary proved to be a talented artist, her sketches and paintings capturing the beauty of the ranch and the surrounding hills with remarkable skill. When she was 16, a visiting art dealer saw her work and offered to help her get formal training in San Francisco. It was a difficult decision, but Franklin and Hannah ultimately agreed to let her go, though they missed her terribly. She returned 2 years later, even more skilled, and opened a small studio in Julian where she taught art to children and sold her paintings to visitors. She never married, choosing instead to focus on her art and her independence, and Franklin and Hannah supported her choice, proud of the woman she had become. The twins proved to be natural ranchers, and as they grew into young men, they took on more and more responsibility for the day-to-day operations. This allowed Franklin to slow down a bit, though he never fully retired. He was happiest on horseback, checking the cattle or mending fences, and Hannah knew better than to try to keep him inside. In 1905, Franklin and Hannah celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered around them. James and Sarah had given them 3 grandchildren, and the house was once again full of the sound of young voices. "Who would have thought," Franklin said to Hannah that night, watching their family from the porch, "that the scared young woman who stepped off that stagecoach would become the matriarch of all this?" "I was terrified," Hannah admitted. "I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." "You were so brave," Franklin said, "coming all this way to marry a stranger." "You were not a stranger for long," Hannah said. "You showed me who you were right from the start, kind and gentle and good. You never pretended to be something you were not." "I could say the same about you, darling," Franklin said. "You have been my partner in every sense of the word, working beside me, raising our children, building this life with me. I could not have done any of it without you." As the years continued to pass, Franklin and Hannah settled into the comfortable rhythms of their later years. They took pleasure in their grandchildren, in watching the ranch continue to thrive under the management of the twins, in the simple joy of each other's company. Franklin's hair went completely white, and his hands became gnarled with arthritis, but Hannah still thought he was the handsomest man she had ever seen. Her own body showed the marks of time and childbirth, but Franklin still looked at her with the same warmth and love he had shown on their wedding day. In the spring of 1910, Franklin fell ill with pneumonia. Hannah nursed him devotedly, rarely leaving his bedside, but despite her best efforts and the doctor's care, he continued to weaken. On a clear morning in late April, with Hannah holding his hand and all their children gathered around, Franklin Hayes closed his eyes for the last time. "I love you," Hannah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for a lifetime of kindness." She felt his hand squeeze hers one last time, and then he was gone. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain in Hannah's chest. Franklin had been her rock, her partner, her love for more than 30 years. The ranch felt empty without him, even filled as it was with family. But Hannah was not alone. Her children rallied around her, supporting her through the worst of the grief. And as the sharp pain dulled to a steady ache, Hannah found comfort in the life they had built together, in the legacy of love and kindness that Franklin had left behind. She lived another 8 years, spending her time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, tending her garden, and keeping Franklin's memory alive through the stories she told. She spoke often of how he had greeted her with kindness that first day in Julian, how that kindness had never faded through all their years together. "He was the best man I ever knew," she would tell her grandchildren. "He taught me that love is not complicated. It is simply choosing, every day, to be kind." Hannah Hayes passed peacefully in her sleep on a warm summer night in 1918, at the age of 62. She was buried beside Franklin on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss so many years before. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations. Each one taught the values that Franklin and Hannah had lived by. The story of how they met, how she had arrived expecting harshness, and he had greeted her with kindness that never faded away, became a family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. In Julian, California, the Hayes family became synonymous with integrity, hard work, and above all, kindness. The legacy of that first meeting, of Franklin's gentle treatment of a scared young woman far from home, rippled out through the years, affecting not just their own family but the entire community. Mary lived to be 93, and in her later years, she painted a portrait from memory of her parents as they had been on their wedding day. Franklin in his best suit, looking both nervous and joyful, and Hannah in her made-over dress with new lace, radiant with love and hope. The portrait hung in the main house for generations, a reminder of where it all began. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren would stand before it, and someone would always tell the story. How great-grandmother Hannah had come west expecting a harsh life with a hard man, and how great-grandfather Franklin had shown her instead that even on the frontier, even in difficult times, kindness could not only survive but thrive. They would speak of the love that had sustained Franklin and Hannah through good times and bad, through drought and plenty, through the joys of watching their children grow, and the sorrows that life inevitably brings. They would talk about how Franklin had kept his promise, how his kindness toward Hannah never dimmed, not even on his last day. And in telling these stories, each new generation learned the most important lesson that Franklin and Hannah had to teach: that love is a choice, that kindness costs nothing but is worth everything, and that the way you treat those you love matters more than anything else in this world. The ranch continued to operate well into the 20th century, adapting to changing times, but never losing sight of the values upon which it was founded. When California celebrated its history, when people spoke of the pioneers who had built the state, the Hayes family was always mentioned, their story standing as an example of what was best about the American West. Not the violence and lawlessness that dominated so many frontier tales, but the quiet courage of two people who chose each other, who chose kindness over harshness, love over convenience, partnership over dominance. Franklin and Hannah Hayes had built something that lasted, not just a successful ranch, but a family legacy of love and respect that would endure for generations. And it all began on a hot August day in 1878, when a frightened young woman stepped off a stagecoach in Julian, California, expecting the worst, and found instead a cowboy with kind brown eyes who offered her his hand and his heart, and promised her a kindness that would never fade away.